One Piece 966 Roger and Whitebeard. While Big is busy silencing the Germs pirates, a group of Marines bust into a hair salon where Chiffon was relaxing at getting her hair treated. This is particularly interesting since we've always seen Chiffon with pigtails before. They're here to arrest Chiffon, ask questions about Big, as they likely figured out that she has left the Yonko to join his crew. I was thinking if perhaps they mistook her for Lola, as she has a bounty. 24 million was revealed in the Vibra cards. But the connection to Big seems to suggest otherwise. These Marines are very oddly fashioned, though they seem to be just regular Marines rather than undercover agents. Given all the Marine iconography on their clothing, the girl on the back even has a seagull pin on her hat. By the way, Chiffon is reading a fashion magazine, Mon Mo. It's cool to hear of a magazine brand within the One Piece world. I wonder who publishes it. We could even get a fashionista counterpart to Morgan's leading it. We get a better shot of the island, showing there's several of those large trees, more if they are obscured, being gigantic compared to the rest of the vegetation, even if the island is quite small. We later see Odin crashing into one of these trees, with it smashing almost like a stone pillar. This made me wonder if they're actually something like rock structures or something. But the patterns on them do seem to suggest there's some type of vegetation, just a really large one. Odin uses an attack with both of his blades, called Nitoryu Odin Gon Midoki. While the kanji writing here stands for Demon's Firearm Imitation, as in, a demon with the po of a firearm, with Gon being a pun on gun given the similar pronunciation. The pronunciation, Gan Modoki, itself is, of course, an ingredient commonly used in Odin. The fact that he prefaces his attack with Nitoryu Odin reminds me of the kid in chapter 919, who said, Nitoryu Orochi. Further proving the theory that Orochi stole a lot from Odin because he was too pathetic to come up with ways to make himself look popular. The fact that he prefaces his attack with Nitoryu Odin reminds me of the kid in chapter 919, who said, Nitoryu Orochi. Further proving the theory that Orochi stole a lot from Odin because he was too pathetic to come up with ways to make himself look popular. Scopper and Raleigh spring into action. This is a big moment, particularly for Scopper, since like I mentioned last time, Scopper has long since been speculated to be the second mate or second strongest member of the crew, with his portrayal here certainly hinting that being the case. There is also a big reveal here, being that Scopper's choice of weapons, mystery that has lasted a whooping 22 years. Yes, really, this mystery had remained unanswered since chapter 19 back in 1997. I wasn't even born yet. See, in chapter 19, we saw Scopper fighting in action. His FRST weapon was an axe, but his second weapon was oddly obscured. This led a lot of people to believe there had to be a reason why it was obscured, or that it was some special weapon. Well, turns out it was just another axe. A bit of an anticlimactic answer. But damn, mystery solved 20 years later. Speaking of weapons, Rayleigh can be seen wielding a sword that is different from the one he had in Sabaody against Kizaru, though it seems it might be the same he had in chapter 0. By the way, despite Scopper having glasses last chapter, he doesn't seem to have any this chapter, allowing us to finally see his eyes. I'm not sure if this was a mistake on Oda's part or intentional, but it's the first time we get to see Scopper's eyes. Roger runs ahead in front of Roger and Rayleigh, claiming he doesn't want them to get hurt. This was referenced long ago by Garp, chapter 588, claiming that Roger was the type of person to always protect his crewmates in a fight because Roger grew up in very bad conditions, so he didn't want to lose anyone else among his crew. Ace inherited that same habit, which ultimately was his demise, and here Roger is seen doing the same. Roger runs ahead in front of Roger and Rayleigh, claiming he doesn't want them to get hurt. This was referenced long ago by Garp, chapter 588, claiming that Roger was the type of person to always protect his crewmates in a fight because Roger grew up in very bad conditions. So he didn't want to lose anyone else among his crew. Ace inherited that same habit, which ultimately was his demise, and here Roger is seen doing the same. Roger uses an attack called Kamusari, composed by the kanji of God, as an abandonment, rejection. Translating it is something like rejection to God, the gods. This is likely a reference to the celestial dragons, as while it's never been elaborated upon, it's quite likely Roger also had a distaste for them, especially being AD and whatnot. The attack is powerful enough to send flying even the likes of Odin. That's the true power of Roger. A clash between the two strongest characters in the verse, excluding perhaps Rocks. It's hard to argue that Roger and Whitebeard are the two strongest characters we've seen in the series, and unless you argue that Roger's illness weakened him. This is quite possibly the highest level clash we've seen in the entire series. What an impact. But what was that impact? The blades didn't even touch. Well, given its nature. This is most likely the shockwave haki Luffy has been trying to learn in Wano, which some falls call the Ryuo haki. Well, that's just the Wano name for haki. Many have used it to name this advanced effect. I'll just stick to shockwave, quite likely the even more advanced version that is mean to destroy the opposite by having the haki low into them. Knowing the strength of these two monsters, both of them used it and both shockwaves clashed at the center, repelling each other's blades at a distance. The black sparks instead represent the clash of conquerors. Also, not saying this automatically power scales them, but since it's been implied that Roger was the strongest, I think it's telling that Whitebeard leapt into the air and slammed down with the force of gravity, while Roger had to take it all pushing from the ground, and they still came out equal. But hey, this is the FRST time Roger has been seen using armament and conqueror's haki. I mean, yeah, big shock, right, but it's still something we hadn't seen before. If it really is true that the voice of all things is observation haki like it's been hinted to, then that means Roger has all three types of haki. Man, who could have ever thought? In fact, we see similar sparks, albeit weaker, when Roger clashed with Odin earlier, as Odin is also a user of Conqueror's haki. The shockwave is so utterly powerful that, unlike other Conqueror's haki clashes, a gigantic bubble of shockwave forms, from which then the sparks come off. We've never seen Conquerors to this degree. The gigantic palm trees are bent. The plants are ripped off the ground, the pirates are sent flying, and the Moby Dick nearly breaks apart. The sea is pushed aside, the clouds in the sky bend to the gust of wind. This is the power of the strongest. Even after the shockwave has ended, the remaining effect still creates some gusts, with Roger and Whitebeard's hair fouling in the wind from it, with even their mustaches bending a little. Is it just me who finds it interesting that both their mustaches look so similar? The two end up exclaiming the same and laugh it off. Behind them, you can see a couple sound effects, which are the rallies of their men heading into battle against each other. By the way, I'd like to take a second to talk about Roger and Whitebeard's blades. Whitebeard is already using his famous Murakamogiri, while Roger is instead using his own sword. Judging by the handle, it seems it could be the one we saw in Chapter O, indicating that this was Roger's famous blade. It has a Homan pattern just like Zoro's swords do, and its crossguard is mostly round with two dents in it. Another interesting detail is how both of them are only imbuing the edges of their blades, with Whitebeard even doing it with incredible precision. This is likely because of what was said by Hyogoro, where haki should be focused and not wasted in parts where it isn't necessary, which we see here. Among Whitebeard's men, we have from right to left, Vista, Atmos Ipoita, Marco, using his Phoenix Alames, Rakuyo, seen with his chain, Whitey Bay. Hey, she didn't leave the crew after all. was just off screen, Andre, and now we get to see Ailuan for the first time too. As you might have guessed, he's yet another one Whitebeard's subordinate who left to form his crew and later assisted him during Marineford. Among Roger's men instead, we have Rayleigh and Scopper, who both point forward with their weapons almost in tandem, leading the charge together. Though Scopper is the one screaming the orders out, as well as some new interesting faces. To start off, there's Seagull at the top, a character that was named in a databook, who finally appears within this ashfact. Among the new faces, we first have these two men at the bottom right side of the panel. One of them wields a large mace and has a big puffy beard, with a Viking, or should I say Elbathian, hat on him. The other one, instead, wears spiked gloves. To the left is this man who dresses like someone from the 18th century. He even wields a musket and moves around in a refined and posh manner. And next to him is this guy with chestnut-like hair. He looks quite a bit like Douglas Bullet. But ultimately we know that young Bullet looked different, so it can't be him. I even see a bit of a resemblance with Drake, or at least his dad, with the sideburns and all. He can later be seen wearing a shirt with Taro written on it. Finally, most interesting of all, there's this guy with bat wings who is flying above the rest. There's two ways to explain this. Either K say he ate some sort of bat devil fruit, making him the first member of Roger's crew to have a devil fruit at this point. Buggy would eat one later. It seems like he doesn't have his powers quite yet here. Case B, he could be part of some sort of devil tribe. Same as Charlotte Dacquoise and perhaps Magellan, not King, since Big Mom said she thought the tribe extinct, maybe being from a tribe that has wings like Skypians. But they look like devil wings instead. As soon as the conflict begins, one of the large trees crumbles into pieces and falls over. Similarly, the skies turn gray, likely an effect similar to the heavens splitting as we saw with Whitebeard versus Shanks and Kaido versus Big Mom. After 3 days and 3 nights of fighting, however, they simply started doing a merry gift exchange. Ah, just in time for Christmas. How sweet. Tilda. In this shot we see Vista, Epoida, Fosa and Blenheim, with a bunch of other Whitebeard pirates and members of the Roger Pirates, including this large guy with a sailor hat. They're a bit small and blurry, but there's some interesting new faces in here too. Wait, whoa, Teach can't sleep at all? Well, at least that clarifies why we see him crying during the moonlit night, likely because he couldn't sleep in the childhood drawing, or maybe he's crying for another reason, but can't sleep anyway. Marco already mentioned during Marineford that Teach's body isn't normal, with something strange to it, so this almost certainly ties into all of it. But why does Teach have this strange body? It's certainly beyond devil fruits, so what exactly gave him such unbelievable powers? But wait, this finally explains something that has been a bit of a mystery for many years. In chapter 134, Luffy says this. He claims he heard of people that don't sleep, having heard it from a guy in a bar. Most assumed this was referring to Makino's bar, as Luffy hasn't really been to that many bars, which would imply it was a member of Shanks' crew. In this case, this would explain it. Shanks originally heard from Buggy from this battle, then likely told one of his crewmates, which then told Luffy. I assume it's a crewmate, since otherwise Luffy would have name-dropped Shanks. It's possible that this was simply meant as a gag back then, and it's just something Oda elaborated upon later. But curiously enough, this was literally the chapter after Blackbeard was first ever revealed. Could it really be a coincidence? Or a plot twist? 832 chapters, 19 plus years, in the making. As Teach looks over at Buggy and Shanks, Shanks reacts with a small silent bubble. After all, this is the first time the two ever met, with their fates eventually being tangled one day in the future. So it's interesting that Shanks already seemed to notice something. Still, he gives a very Luffy-like answer, saying that he's jealous, since he would have so much free time if he wasn't forced to sleep every night. Meanwhile, Roger, Whitebeard and Odin gather somewhere more quiet, where Roger reveals, "Wait, what? What?" At last, the name of the final island is revealed. Originally, Laugh Tale was set up to be the island at the end of the log post, but during so it was revealed Laugh Tale is separate. The island at the end of the Grand Line, before simply called the Final Island, only tells of how to get to Laugh Tale. But this island finally has a name, being the star where the course leads, Road Star. The name itself is Reaally. Interesting. In the original text, it is written with the kanji Shuikei Shion Shindao, but its reading is in katakana. Being Rodo Suda, the kanji reading can be divided in 3 parts. Shui Shion is path. But more specifically, it means the course a ship takes. Also, alternatively, it can mean a current's direction where it takes a ship, but I think course here makes more sense. Shing is simply star, while Dao just means island. In that regard, the name could be read as Course Star Island, while the katakana Rodosuda is quite simply the English words Road Star. But why this name? Well, it's easy to explain. Just look at the panel with Roger above. The way the islands are laid out over the Grand Line, connected to one another by lines, makes them look like a night sky, with the islands looking like stars and the lines like constellations. As such, the final island being where all these converge makes all this almost like a road of stars leading to this final island. It's all the more fitting since the kanji is literally that of a ship's course, the course being towards this final star. But why the use of the word road? Why not course? Well, if you think about it, it makes sense. Road Star is the island where you're meant to first find out about the road poneglyphs, and as such, the island literally acts as a road towards finding the road poneglyphs and then, ultimately, Laugh Tale. But the final island being Road Star is a much bigger reveal than it might seem at first. Let's recap it bit by bit. During Zo, Inuarashi mentioned that, by reaching the end of the log posts, one would reach an island, Road Star, where they would find out about the importance of poneglyphs. He also states that the details are revealed about what civilization carved the poneglyphs, the Kozuki clan, and clues on how to find Laugh Tale with the 4 stones. Roger explains in this chapter that he found out about the Kozuki clan's involvement there, likely why he scouted Odin, as well as other clues. It's exactly unclear how Roger got such specifics about the existence of Laugh Tale and the Kozuki clan and all, especially since you'd imagine they'd be carved in poneglyph runes and not, well, the language of the off-world. Let's not get into that can of worms, but it's possible that via his voice of all things Roger was able to partially understand these clues and thus sought out Odin. As Rayleigh and Big Mom explained it, he could vaguely understand the stones but not fully decipher them in detail. But what's truly interesting about Road Star, it ties with something else Inuarashi mentioned, which in turn was mentioned by Roger. Let's go in order. In chapter 905, Crocus first revealed Laugh Tale. He claimed that the log post would eventually lead to the final island, Laugh Tale. Nami then rightfully inquired this to Inuarashi, asking him if the final island wasn't Laugh Tale. But Inuarashi responded by saying that there would really be no reason for Crocus to lie in that regard. The reason he says this is because the cat and dog never reached Laugh Tale themselves, since they left the crew before Roger got there, while instead knew about the road poneglyphs because of what Roger already knew here. So they were simply going off of Crocus's word, since he did reach Laugh Tale. And in fact, this might be a quintessential clue to understand everything. It's a clue I barely hear anyone ever talk about, and I've been holding back on talking about it for some years since the chapter came out, since the occasion never came up. So let me finally address it now. What if, ultimately, Laugh Tale is Road Star? After all, Crocus said that the island at the end of the pose is Laugh Tale, and Inuarashi said he'd have no reason to lie. So I've always thought What if Roadstar is the destination where the 4 road poneglyphs point to? But perhaps something must be done to show the real laugh tale. Maybe it's sunk under the sea? Or maybe there's some other way to reveal it at Roadstar. There certainly has to be a tie after what was said here. Honestly, all these names, Grand Line, Laugh Tale, Roadstar, God Valley, all of these names sound so similar, with a combination of 2 brief words. I wonder if there is a link to it all. Also, Roger confirms something pretty big as well. He claims that there are legends of a treasure there, which confirms without a doubt that yes, Roger did not leave the One Piece there. It was already present long before. We already technically knew this. It's been stated on some occasions a bit vaguely, but this makes it undoubtable. Interestingly, it wasn't just a treasure that Roger found that no one knew. There already were legends surrounding the existence of this treasure, possibly originating from first-hand accounts from all the way back in the Void Century. But just what is this treasure? Who left that treasure? What is this treasure meant for? What is One Piece? But there's something I find interesting about the treasure. When Crocus first name-dropped Laugh Tale, Usopp asked if the One Piece was on that island. Crocus simply replied, "Who knows?" Although that is the most likely theory, nobody has ever reached there to confirm it. Maybe he's just teasing them here, but what if there is some truth to it? What if Roger was on the cusp of reaching Laugh Tale, of finding out the One Piece, but ultimately decided to stop in Stampede, in a scene confirmed to have been written by Oda himself? After Roger left Laugh Tale, he claimed that we were too early, something Rayleigh also said in Sabaody. Maybe, after figuring out the true history, they realized that they really were too early to carry out what had to be carried out at Laugh Tale, as indicated by the true history, and as such, decided to wait for a newer generation to do so in their stead. But hey, when it comes to this scene, there's a pretty cool detail that I'm sure many dedicated fans aside from myself likely noticed right away when reading the chapter. The way Roger declares wishing to become Pirate King is done identically to how Luffy did it in front of Sabo and Ace in chapter 585. But the detail goes way beyond just the panels and the dialogue. If you look closely, even the bandages on their faces are the exact same. Such a brilliant callback, but this reveals one more thing, being that Roger already aspired to become Pirate King and that it was a moniker he chose himself, not that he was given afterwards. Given the way Whitebeard reacts, it seems like it was made up by Roger as something he aspired to be, which later spread around the world, inspiring many to search for the One Piece and attain the much-envied title Roger had claimed for himself. Whitebeard grows furious at Roger asking to borrow Odin for a year, causing the seas around the island to shift, like he did in Marineford. This proves that he already had his powers back here. So assuming that Roger did not eat any devil fruit, that makes his fight against Whitebeard all the more impressive, though arguably Whitebeard might have held back his powers due to the small size of the island and his crew being there. Odin ponders about Roger's offer, wondering if their encounter really was just pure chance or some weird work of fate. This likely fights with the will of the D, and bringing up the question if it really did bring Odin and Roger together to bring change to history. Though of course, Oda brings up the gag of the disgusted face to show how betrayed Whitebeard is feeling. I hope this becomes a reoccurring face in the series. Anyway, with this scene over, let's address a couple things about it. First of all, this chapter proves this wasn't the Sakura sake drinking scene from the brief flashback before Whitebeard's death. It sort of makes sense, as Roger likely learned of the will of the D once he learned about the true history. That likely happened on one final occasion, perhaps even after the Roger Pirates disbanded during those final months of his life. This is particularly interesting to think about, as by the time he sees Whitebeard again, Odin will likely have already left, likely to go back to Wano, possibly after having heard certain details about the true history, which will make things a bit awkward between the two. Secondly, IFND interesting that Whitebeard has a small bandage over his left pectoral. Eyes only in one panel, so it might just be a mistake. But I find it interesting that said bandage is in a close position and in the same shape of one of his few scars, so maybe he did get a small scratch in this clash. If that's the case, then damn, Roger really is a monster. Secondly, IFND interesting that Whitebeard has a small bandage over his left pectoral. Eyes only in one panel, so it might just be a mistake. But I find it interesting that said bandage is in a close position and in the same shape of one of his few scars, so maybe he did get a small scratch in this clash. If that's the case, then damn, Roger really is a monster. The two Minx and Aizu seem to have decided to await the return of Odin to the crew, a bit forced, but it explains why things are as they are. We know that later the cat and dog sneak onto Roger's ship, 1LL address that later, but this at least explains why Ilzo stayed behind. Like I speculated, it ended up being an accident. He simply wanted to await Odin's return, but it seems that never happened, and Odin never met the Whitebeard pirates ever again. By the way, Odin is holding 3 pieces of paper when he talks of how they've become incredible pirates. These are quite likely bounty posters, as the 3 of them might have gotten bounties too, being on the crew of the Great Whitebeard and all. I wonder what their numbers are, same as Odin. It's fascinating how far Whitebeard has come with Odin. ATF first, he didn't want him at all costs, believing his desire to lead to be an issue. But despite that, Odin sacrificed his dreams for the sake of Toki and even showed disgust for being the 2nd Division commander, proving Whitebeard wrong. Despite being very grumpy about it, he clearly cares about Odin and even forces his crew to return the supplies Roger gave them as thanks. The Oro Jackson sails on it with Odin in tow. There's a couple cool details here. While it already was there 2 chapters ago, I failed to mention that the big egg on the ship is visible, as this took place after the Edwar battle against the Shiki. Then again, it was there even since before that point. Second, the frontal sail has G.O.D. Roger written on it, which we hadn't seen in past depictions, same as the Whitebeard on the Moby Dick, and seems to be something added recently. Past depictions also didn't show Roger's Jolly Roger on the sails, which is reminiscent of Luffy's ships. Toki and the 2 children followed with Odin, which makes sense. Roger's remark about babies is interesting, though I wonder if it's just a generic line or if there is more meaning behind it. Also, just as I suspected long ago and explained during the whole time travel thing, we finally got to see the scene where Momo met Roger. Who's gonna become the Pirate King? Yes, Uncle Roger will. Inuarashi and Neko Memushi snuck aboard, which, like I said, explains why only Aizu got left behind. But this finally clarifies the entire timeline of events in their lives. So let's properly recap and clarify what happened to the dog and cat. First of all, as 7-year-olds, they left So as children and got to Wano. They became Odin's retainers 30 years ago, at age 10. They snuck onto the Moby Dick and traveled alongside Odin and Whitebeard. Currently, 26 years ago, at age 14, they snuck onto the Oro Jackson and traveled with Odin and Roger. It's after this point that things are a bit muddy, but they finally start to make sense. The 2 mentioned in chapter 920 having visited Sky Island and Fishman Island, the FRST of which was confirmed in this chapter. But then it was said at some point they had to leave the crew due to an accident, as such never having reached Laugh Tale. And later they were found at Wano during Odin's death. But of course, it all lines up. When Roger visited Wano for the road poneglyph, Kinnaman mentioned seeing Roger. It's possible the dog and cat got left behind for some random reason, missing the final trip to Laugh Tale. They awaited for Odin to return and later witnessed his death. causing them to enter the endless fight they've been in over not being able to save them, being forced to return to Zoe. It's so satisfying to have clarified things at last. Once again we get to see many members of Roger's crew, from the large fish man, the chestnut hair guy, the one with the gladiatorial helmet, the one with bat wings, the 18th century looking guy, the sailor guy, and even some females. One of them interestingly has horns. Roger's crew lands on a nearby island, and hey, that's very clearly Mock Town. It's been a long while since we last saw it, but it means they've landed at Jaya, making their next destination Skypia. Odin is quickly accepted into the crew and everyone gathers around the ship to eat. What else? More Odin. You can even notice Shanks and Buggy scarfing down their food in the corner. Oh, and hello there. I see you love Odin too. This panel might look confusing at first for those not familiar with the medium, but here, to entertain the people at the party, Odin imitates a traditional kabuki pose. Yo-yo. Crocus brings up that Roger has only a year left to live. This is particularly odd, as this flashback is currently at 2 years before Roger actually died. It was made very clear this was 26 years ago and there was no real chance for a time skip. So I wonder how he survived that extra year? By the way, as we've seen a few times before in the series, such as with Chopper's backpack, the medical cross in the Upworld is made with 2 diagonal lines, unlike our world where we use a vertical and a horizontal line. The way the Roger pirates arrive at Skypia is damn near identical to how the Straw Hats did all those years ago back in chapter 239. Oda even cheekily drew many of the clouds in the exact same shape too. What a madman. Everyone stares, stunned at Skypia, with Buggy grabbing Shanks' hat in shock. A cool detail is that those 4 fingers are the ones he would later use to hold the 3 knives that would stab through the same hat in that same spot. It's even the same hand. What a detail. G.O.D. Just as we had been told back in Skypia, Roger managed to find the golden bell. In this case, he clarifies he found it by hearing its voice, which don't forget. We know that Odin at some point developed as well, as he could hear Zunisha among Roger's crew members. There are quite a few large ones, but even compared to those there seems to be a giant. How does he fit on the ship? This is the first we've heard of him. And there is Odin. And of course, just like we had speculated, Odin left the iconic message from back in the Skypia arc that Robin read. He took all the messages of the Rio Poneglyph and delivered it all the way to Laugh Tale, where he finally completed it and unveiled the true history. In that regard, it makes sense he'd start from here when he first got Odin. This is the end of the clip. Bye.